Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Just before we, sorry, my name is Philip Gales, and I'm here to talk about objectives and key results. I will do an intro in a moment, and I'll tell you a bit more about myself and what we're going to be talking about. But just a few ground rules. This is going to take about 40-45 minutes, and we'll have 15 minutes of questions at the end. It'll be interactive. There'll be a workshop component. There'll be some breakout. But if you can leave your questions to the end, that will be great. That said, if anything happens during the talk, if I cut out, if you can't hear me, if I say something you don't understand, or there's an acronym or something, please just put that in the chat. And Wes, if I can ask you to keep an eye on that one and just be like, hey, you know, you've used this weird acronym for what does that mean? People are confused. That would be superb. So, second request, if you're happy to, please can you turn your cameras on? It sounds weird, but just in terms of presenting feedback, it helps me a lot. Otherwise, PG-13 version. Oh, dang. Actually, this lot are just ignoring me and walked away. So psychologically, it helps me understand if you're engaged or not. So let us get going. Let's present this. So today I'm talking about objectives and key results, or OKRs. This is an OKRs 201. We'll cover a lot of the stuff that I've previously presented in OKRs. Don't worry if you've not seen the basic version, we'll cover that. And I'll ensure that Wes, Jeff, Tabitha, etc. can get the video for that one. But this is an OKRs presentation that is more tailored to early stage startups that are sort of early growth, around the 5 to 20 employees, got some traction, got an MVP, and it's going to be about why objectives and key results are one of the most important levers you have for managing and coordinating your business. I'll jump through this. By way of background, I'm a serial entrepreneur, founded a couple of companies myself, built a couple of companies, and I specialize in operations, data, and metrics at early growth stage startups. I've worked with a number of different incubators and accelerators across Toronto, out into the Waterloo corridor, and these are my books. These are all books filled with notes on companies. I've worked about 120 plus like early growth stage, so product 10, 20, 100K MRR, etc. And a lot of what I'm talking about today is based upon that experience of seeing those companies grow. And two things come to mind. One is that at an early stage and throughout the life of a company, execution is everything. But the flip side of that is there's a lot of distractions, there's a lot of things going on, there's a lot of opportunities, but there's also just a lot happening for a founder. And then the second part is, as I see startups grow, every single one I've worked through goes through what I call the messy period. They start to bring on a new team, they grow from about 10 to 20 to 50 people, they start to scale, and suddenly everything goes to hell. And every single company goes through this. There's internal friction, time is wasted, money is wasted, people fight, people end up leaving, and it is just a complete mess. And I've spent a lot of time trying to think about that, and what I see is that a lot of the things that happen and work at an early stage startup just fundamentally don't at a scaling startup. And so you need to change your mindset, and a lot of that is about how you manage teams and people. And a lot of the solution to that is objectives, key results, tracking and explaining what matters, and holding people accountable to that. So we're going to talk about that messy period. We're going to talk about OKRs. We're going to talk about how to use them to avoid a lot of that mess, to avoid a lot of that pain, that trouble, that wasted money, the people leaving, the stress for you. And then we're going to roll that into a workshop and an intro to the OKRs product that iBoost uses. And we'll talk about why they want you to use that and why it's beneficial. Does that all sound good? Cool. So, and by the way, this is my, she's now 2, this is my daughter. She sometimes hears Daddy speaking to his friends and wants to come and wave hello. So my apologies. Of course, we're all working from home. So if she pops in, just wave to her. She's called Nora. That's us pair programming. Execution. Fundamentally, execution is everything when it comes to startups. Your idea is not worth anything unless you can actually execute upon it. And it's the execution that creates value. And that execution really falls into these two buckets of figuring out what you need to do and actually getting it done. And what tends to happen with startups is that they struggle to figure out what to do, or they figure it out and they don't actually get it done for a variety of reasons. And this leads to a lot of waste, it leads to a lot of wasted time, it leads to a lot of problems, and it just wastes time and money. And there's a couple of problems here. One is that, frankly, there's a lot of things that are very distracting for startups. They seem productive, but they're really potentially not. Entrepreneurs. Sorry, it's now COVID, so this is less applicable, but the entrepreneurs that go to every single meetup, they go to every single tech group, they're chatting, they're networking, they want to grab coffee with you, etc. Networking is great, don't get me wrong. But when you spend all your time doing that and you're not actually executing on your company, that's just a distraction. Superficial copying. People look at Shopify and they say they've got a cool logo, they've got a brand, they've got a great website, they've got a wonderful office. Nobody's in it, but they've got a wonderful office with a foosball table with snacks. That's what I need to have a successful startup. No, what you need is a product and to execute upon it, and we'll talk about that. At the other end of the spectrum, you don't want to launch something that's crappy. I'm not telling you to launch something that has security issues. I'm not telling you to launch something that's absolute rubbish, but don't be a perfectionist and overbuild your product. Get something in people's hands. And then there's people that, and I know a lot of these, are just really great at fundraising. And they raise some money. That's great. They've got a vision. They execute upon it. They raise some more money. One of the companies just down the road from here, Hubber, unfortunately recently went under. Great idea. Great at fundraising. I don't fundamentally think there was anything really there as a product. I can't comment on this, by the way, but there are a lot of things that feel like you're actually executing, but often taken to an extreme, they're really just unproductive distractions. You need to do them, but at the end of the day, what matters is executing. And what I mean by that is, if you don't have a product, then go talk to your customers, figure out what their needs are, and figure out if you can solve them. If you figure that out, then go and try and solve them and get something into their hands as soon as possible. If you've got something into their hands, figure out if they really like it, and ideally scale it. So there's a lot of things that you can get distracted by, there's a lot of opportunities, but really it comes down to solve a problem, get it in people's hands, scale it. And the idea of OKRs is to help you focus on what you really, really need to do and take away a lot of these distractions and pull you back to, do I have a product? Do people like it? Do people love it? Do people want it? Can I scale it?
Do I hear your little batter?
Wee bit of background noise there. Now, the second part that I see with companies, and this is going into a more mature company, and Wes was telling me some of the stages that you're at, MVPs out there, users, revenue starting to scale. What I see is what I call the messy period. And I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pull up my wonderful little whiteboard. So let's talk about this. It would be useful if I could find the stop sharing button. Sorry, guys. How do I stop sharing my screen?
It's going to be at the bottom.
Yeah, I thought so, but it's not. Oi, what's going on here? There we go, it was hiding. Sorry about that. So, this is going to be very generalized. Just caveat it with that. But if you look at most successful startups over time, it looks a little bit like this is time, and say this is revenue, or this is number of employees, or number of customers. It doesn't really matter, just some measure of size. It's my experience that startups generally look a bit like this. They've got an idea and they get something out, they get a bit of traction, they sort of play around, they pivot a bit, and at some point in time they start to get some traction and they start to grow and then they scale, and hopefully, they IPO or they're purchased. It's my experience that the startup looks fundamentally different in these various stages. This is a scaling company or a growth startup. Maybe it's a little bit more like this actually. This is an early stage startup. They're trying to find a product, a problem, a niche, solve something. And frankly, in the middle here is what I call the shit show period. Every single company I've worked at, every single company I've helped has gone through this period. And it typically seems to kick in somewhere between like 10 and 20 employees, maybe a bit earlier. And it tends to go through until about 50 to 100 employees. It tends to be around your sort of seed-ish. It tends to go away sort of halfway between Series A and Series B. And what ends up happening is employees fight. Sorry, I don't know if you can see that properly. Departments misaligned. Stuff happens. Nobody really knows what's going on. There's no clear direction. There's a lot of waste. Employees end up leaving. People get fired for the wrong reasons. Your money is wasted. Traction often stops. It stops and starts. And it's just a mess. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I came to the conclusion, I'm just going to rub this off and I'll draw another diagram. I came to the conclusion a lot of this is about the fundamental structure and nature of an early stage company versus a growth stage company. So I'm assuming all of you are at or have been through this stage of being an early stage company, maybe with you, a couple of founders or early employees, and maybe you've got a CTO and they've got a couple of devs reporting to them. Or maybe you've got a salesperson, you've got a couple of BDRs or salespeople. And so maybe this is sort of something like your small early stage startup. It's a few people. The great thing is if you want to make a decision, then everyone is super aligned. You can communicate easily. Everyone's pretty chatty on Slack. Decisions happen really easily. Information is communicated very easily. There's a high degree of communication. So let's say easy communication. There's a high degree of alignment. People know what's going on. So, for example, if you as a CEO have an idea, you might ping one of the devs and say, hey, what would it take to build this thing? They go, okay, we can do this and this and this. You're like, okay, we should do that. Maybe your CTO hears about this on Slack and is like, oh, that's a great idea. Okay, let's do this. Or like somebody has a problem, it quite quickly comes to the Slack channel, you figure it out. And that's great. It allows you to move rapidly. You don't want complicated lines of communication. That's what you need to be as an early stage company. Perfect. A growth stage company, 50, 100, 100 plus people. Again, I'm generalizing this a lot. There is a lot to discuss about corporate structure, but typically it looks a bit like this. You've got a CEO, you've got probably a VP engineering, VP product, VP sales, etc. Maybe you have a team lead in engineering who has some devs working for them. You've got a couple of team leads, maybe in sales, you've got a sales manager, maybe you've got a head of marketing or something. They've also got employees working for them, etc. There's lots of variance on this. I'm not going to go into the pros and cons of different management structures, org charts, etc. But fundamentally, no matter what you do, you're going to end up with something a bit like this. And the problem with this is that you've got this enormous degree of separation between the CEO and the VPs and individual contributors. And so a lot of the things that you might have done as an early stage company, as a CEO, actually end up becoming really, really destructive in this environment. Example, you're the CEO, you have an idea for a product or a feature, sorry. You go to a dev and you say, hey, let's build this thing, let's get it out there. Let's be hacky, let's execute bomb. The problem is, if you go straight to a dev as you used to previously at an early stage, that worked really well, but you end up cutting out their manager and their manager's manager. You end up alienating them from other devs because suddenly they're getting special treatment. Like, why is the CEO coming and talking to this person? And you can end up throwing them because suddenly the CEO is telling you one thing, the VP of engineering is telling them something else. They don't have time for this. Or say, one of your sales managers says, hey, we should do this thing. Someone else, they come to you and they say, hey, we should do this. And you go, okay, go do it. But you haven't figured that what they're proposing to do causes an issue with product. Or let's say someone in dev says, I've got a large dev backlog. So I've got a lot of tech debt. I need to work through this in order to make the product more effective. Someone in sales says, well, that's great, but there's a lot of bugs and customers are complaining. Sorry, someone in sales says, hey, look, customers want this new feature. I can sell this if I have this new feature. Perfect, let's go for that. Someone in product says, well, there's a lot of bugs. Customers are complaining about it. I need you, dev, to fix the bugs. So you've got three conflicting perspectives. If you as a leader, VP, CEO, etc., jump in and try and solve this problem, which maybe was the right thing to do at an early stage, what ends up happening is you again cut out your middle managers, you cut out communication, and you also end up becoming the de facto decision maker for everything, which means you end up bottlenecking your company. So what do we need? What am I saying here? The stuff that works really well for you now and worked really well for you previously is actually the exact opposite of what you're going to have to do in the future. And momentum and familiarity will mean that you keep doing it, which frankly will mean you'll fuck up quite a lot. And that's okay. Be aware of it, because what I'm proposing is a different way of starting to manage your company. Ideally, in this scenario with this dev, the salesperson, and the product person disagreeing on something, it would be great if they could understand what the direction of the company is and what the right answer is. That's simple. For example, if you need to raise money in 6 months' time, that means you might need 3 months of really solid growth so that you can show great figures and metrics to your VCs. That means that you need the work to be done that helps with growth. So the dev technical debt probably isn't the thing you should be doing. The bugs, maybe, but the new product features that can get you new sales might be the thing that you really need. And ideally, you are not going in to say, hey, I want you to do this, you need to do that, you need to do that. Ideally, this group of 3 people in this example are able to figure that out themselves. How do they do that? They need to understand what direction the company is going in and make the decisions themselves. And so you want them plus or minus aligned in the same direction. Ideally, the entirety of your company knows what direction you need to go in, and based upon that, they are making the right decisions. It doesn't mean they make decisions without stress. It doesn't mean they make decisions without discussions. It doesn't mean you have no conflicts. Actually, you need those to figure out the right direction, but it does mean that they know what direction to go in, and they generally go in that direction. And the best way of doing that is to set a clear company a clear set of company objectives, and tie to that so that you know if you are executing upon them, and so that you can hold people accountable, a set of key results. The reason I'm pushing OKRs so much is that whilst you are beautifully aligned at this point in time, as you grow, you're going to become increasingly distant from your employees. It's going to turn into a shit show. You're going to increasingly be pulled into weird conversations and arguments where you're like, guys, just figure it out. Why are you bringing me into this? And you're going to get more and more stressed and worried. And the solution is OKRs. And I don't say that lightly. I'm going to jump off this. By the way, this presentation will be shared with all of you. I'm going to jump back into sharing my screen and showing this. Just to recap. My apologies. You'll grow, you'll go through a shit show period. And the problem is that time is wasted, cash is burnt, departments clash, people leave, you'll end up firing people, you'll end up regretting it, trust me. And the problem is that the stuff that you did at an early stage, which makes you really successful and you need to do, I'm not vilifying it, it's actually the right thing, ends up being the stuff that you shouldn't do at scale, like intervening in directly, like making discussions, like telling people what to do. And the best solution to this is a singularly aligned company with a clear set of objectives. And that's where OKRs come in. So what do we want? We want a tool that focuses the entire company on what needs to be done, that avoids distractions both for you. Don't be a entrepreneur. Don't just randomly copy what Shopify did. Focus on what you need to do, that communicates that internally with intentionality, with clarity, and that holds people accountable. And that's what OKRs do. OKRs have evolved over time, and they really evolve out of a concept from 1954 by Peter Drucker, which was management by objectives, which is that first point I made of you want to align all your company with this is the direction we should go in. When they know that, they're given autonomy and they're empowered to do that and to go in that direction. So number one thing is objectives. But the problem through the 50s, 60s, 70s as people worked on that was that if you say, hey, your objective is growth, that's great, but it doesn't really define what growth is. You don't know if it's happening. You don't know if people are doing the right stuff. So you can't hold people accountable. You know, your MRR is 5K. Sorry, your monthly recurring revenue is $5,000 per month. This month, at the end of Q2, it's $6,000. At the end of the year, it's $8,000. Have you grown revenue? Yes. Was that good? Was that bad? Well, you don't know. And so this evolved into the 90s into what you'll hear as KPIs, SMART goals, etc. And we'll go into some of this nomenclature, but don't get too carried away by the words, which become very, very specific. So you want to grow in revenue. SMART goal has the properties of being specific, measurable, achievable or agreed, realistic and time-bound. So it means you can hold people accountable. You say, well, we need to get to $5,000 in monthly recurring revenue by the end of March. Perfect. The problem is it's really, really boring, right? Nobody gets out of bed going like, hey, I really want to do this. I really, really want to grow my MRR by this, blah, 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 right? And so the eventual evolution of that in the early aughts is OKRs, really pushed by Google, but used by a lot of startups, which combine this Peter Drucker management by objectives, exciting, inspiring, with the accountability of SMART goals. And that really is these two components. Your objectives get people excited, they give autonomy, they give direction. There should be an exciting, inspiring rallying cry. And ideally, in my experience, you want about 2 to 4, ideally 3 actually, per company at any one time. Any more than that, and you're spread too thinly. Any less than that, and I think you're sort of wasting opportunities. And ideally, you want to be talking about a 4 to 12 week time horizon. If they're too far into the future, then you don't have the opportunity to react to what you're learning. If they're too short, then you just spend all your time setting your objectives and you're like, hey, do this, hey, do this, hey, do this. And effectively, it's just a bucket list of what you need to be doing. So 4 to 8 weeks is ideal at a sort of pre-incubator stage, pre-product, building your MVP. 4 to 12 weeks is much better when you've got an MVP out there, you're starting to earn some revenue, but you still need to iterate around stuff. That gets people excited. The problem then is, are people actually doing it? And that's where the key result comes in. And that holds people accountable and allows you to understand if you've hit your objective. It's all about a specific measure that lets you understand if you're doing the thing you want. There's a lot of discussion around this, but in my experience, ideally you want about 1 to 3 key results per objective. The reason for that is, in my experience at previous company, we told everyone we need to grow revenue. We grew revenue, but we grew revenue by subsidizing prices, selling to customers that weren't the ideal customer, by misleading users, by ramping up our churn rate effectively. And so by just setting one objective of grow revenue, often people start to game the system. And so you might want, or you should consider, ideally really about 3 key results per objective. So you can start saying things like, hey, the key result is to grow revenue, but we're also going to watch the type of customer. We want to watch the churn rate, for example, right? And ideally your key results have this property of being SMART. So they're specific. They're very, very clear what needs to have been done. and they're clear in a measurable metrics-based way, there should be a number associated with them. That number might be a Boolean, 0, 1. It might be a number of features. It might be a percentage satisfaction. It might be a dollars of revenue. It might be a number of customers. It might be a percentage churn rate, but it has to be measurable. Otherwise, you can't tell if the objective has been met. It also has to be in some way achievable, agreed, and I'll bucket all these together, achievable, agreed, realistic. This comes into the area of, if you tell your company you need to double revenue by the end of next month, your company and your employees are just going to go, man, that's stupid, right? OKRs are dumb, founders dumb, like I'm going to do my stuff, but there's no way I can reach that 200%. If you tell people you need to grow by 15% over the next month, and you've been doing like 7% month on month so far, well, that's kind of realistic. It's a stretch goal. It's something people can work on. So you need to balance like stretching and pulling people with people just disengaging, which is where you need it to be realistic to some degree, achievable in some way, but also a stretch and also agreed. So these properties are important. That's not to say you lowball stuff, but it is to say you don't set a crazy, crazy target because people just disengage. And finally, it's got to be time bound. You've got to say, look, I want to get to $5,000 in monthly recurring revenue by the end of March, because if you don't, you'll be at $4,000 and people are like, okay, and then you'll be at $4,500 and people are like, okay, and then you'll be $4,800 and you'll never get there because you can't hold people accountable. Is that clear? I know I said I'd leave questions to the end. Are there any particular questions on those? Excellent. Because we are going to go into a practical. I'm going to give you, I've done this in 5 minutes before and it always drags on a little bit. I'm going to give you 4 minutes. And I'd like you to either pull up your objectives and key results for your current company or make up a set of objectives and key results. I don't really care that much. The practical here is about make a set of OKRs. I'm trying to keep it quite time constrained for the simple reason that what matters with OKRs is making them and communicating them, not the perfection of them. I've never seen a company succeed because they wrote the most perfect OKRs. I've seen companies fail because they had OKRs but they never told people or because they never said them. So don't put them on a pedestal, write something, get it out there. But 4 minutes, at the end of 4 minutes, I'm going to keep a timer and stopwatch and I'll keep it weighted. I'm going to choose a couple of companies at random to share their OKRs. So get going. Sorry, no breakout rooms. If you need to talk to co-founders, I'm sorry, you're going to have to use Slack for it or message or whatever. So we're 2 minutes in. No pressure, but that's halfway. And I'm going to randomly choose somebody and we're going to get some OKRs out there. No pressure, but we're coming up to a minute. Oh, coming down to 30 seconds. Last 20 seconds. Come on, people. Claire. Okay, I'm going to call it there. So thank you all. I hope there was some tension there. I hope there was some pressure. And I hope there was a bit of panicking. And just to be really clear, I'm not actually going to choose any of you. We're going to create a set of OKRs. I don't know if that was obvious, by the way. One thing I want to reiterate is, if that was panicked, that's totally okay. If you could not clearly say, hey, this is the thing that I need to achieve now, this month, with my company in terms of an objective, that should be worrying to you. Because this should have been a clear, I need to execute on this thing and this thing and this thing. And if it wasn't, if it was a bucket list, if it was a load of stuff, then I think you need to go away and really think clearly. Conversely, if you say, look, I need to get this done and this done, perfect. But you need to get there. This exercise should not have been about how do I word my objectives. It should have been, you know what, I need to get that done and that done. And there should have been tension there around, well, I clearly have these things to do and I get it. And there's a load of other stuff. Yeah, okay, but I need to get these done. And then your key results, in my experience, there tends to be a tension around, well, I know what that thing is. I might have also lied to you about timing, but never mind. I know what that thing is, but how do I measure it? Like, how do I really know it? And so we're going to jump out of the presentation and we're going to jump into Inate, which is my product for sharing and reporting OKRs. I assume that all of you have been onboarded or will soon to be onboarded or have received the invite email. So when you log in, you'll see something like this. The idea of Inate is that objectives and key results are really important for you to understand what you're doing and to communicate with your company. But they're also a really, really good way for iBoost, for Where's for Jeff, for Tabitha to understand what you're doing and where you need help, because they're highlighting, these are the main things I need to do, and they're highlighting, are you succeeding? Are you struggling? Do you have challenges? And therefore where they can help. It is shared with iBoost, and I'm going to talk about that. If you go into your settings, you have full control. This is a made-up company, by the way. This is my example company. You have full control over who has access. You can add co-workers. You can add your co-founders. If you have employees, managers, it's a really great thing to add them to this so they can see what's going on. And you can completely control who has access. So unfortunately, Joaquin, I worked with him about 5-6 months ago. Sorry, mate. We've not worked with each other for a long time. I'm going to remove your access. And you know what? Liam's a great guy. Actually, no, let's do info. I can control what people can look at. So I want him to be able to see the OKRs. There are a host of other features in Inate which we will not touch upon. Contact me separately. But you can control access to, you can give individual access controls to all the features, including stopping people seeing your OKRs. You can also see which investors have access. iBoost is not currently here. A number of other accelerators are, and you can say, you know what, I'm going to stop you looking at my OKRs. I recommend you don't, because it's really useful for iBoost, but if you really want to control access to stuff, you have full control over that. Take a step back. As you go into your OKRs, the first time you log on, there should be a training which leads you through, again, a reiteration of what we talked about, what objectives are, what key results are, and then how to start to measure them and to put in the initiatives, the individual tasks associated. If you want to repeat that, Just click here and the interactive training starts again. If you want to create an objective, what was my objective today? I wanted to get iBoost companies excited about OKRs. Was it excited? Or was it actually excited about and using OKRs? Actually, maybe it was just get iBoost companies using OKRs. That's my objective. It's over the next few weeks. Maybe it's a little bit short in terms of timeline, but you know, there's going to be some time to work on this. What's the key result? I want you to turn your mutes off. How do I measure? How do I know if I've got iBoost companies using OKRs? What could I measure that tells me that? Well, maybe it's the number of iBoost companies using OKRs. It's not so measurable. So what do we want here? You know, there's what, 20, 30, 40 iBoost companies. Maybe it's a percentage. What if we say, well, if iBoost companies are using OKRs, I want a percentage of iBoost companies using Inate for OKRs. Well, that's measurable, but it's not got a numerical figure. So maybe it's, I want more than 90% of iBoost companies using Inate.ai for OKRs. There's no time aspect to this. By end of March 2021. What do we think about that as a key result? That tells me if I've got 50% of you using this, then iBoost companies aren't using OKRs. If 100% of you are, then great. There might be one of you that can't or it's not suitable, so 90%, great. And my metric there is percentage iBoost companies create that. Now, I can measure something here. I don't actually know what this value is, but forgive me. Currently today, let us say that none of you are using Inate. My target is by the end of March, at least 90% of you will be using Inate. There we go. I'm going to submit that. I'm just going to close this for a moment. And now I have a trend line. Maybe I log into the system tomorrow and I'm like, oh, this is super interesting. 10% of you are using it. Now I can see that I'm tracking up here. And Tabitha, Jeff, Wes can see, oh, you know, this is good. They're tracking towards it. But maybe the end of the month comes and it's still at 10%. I don't believe in failure, by the way. I believe in learning. And I don't think Tabitha, Jeff, Wes, etc. believe in failing. So you might say, hey, Philip, you know, you're failing on this one. No. I might be finding that actually my OKRs are really hard to use, or the product isn't that great, or you know what, something's happened. And Tabitha and Jeff and Wes can come in and say, hey, Philip, I notice you're not hitting this key result. You know, what's going on here? How can we help you? Is this a product thing? Like, is this a sales thing? Is this the way you're talking to people? You know, maybe you've got a dev problem. Maybe you actually haven't sent out the invites. You know, how can we help you get to this? And that's the key thing. This is about how can iBoost help you? How can the entrepreneurs and residents, professionals, etc. help you? It's not about slap on the wrist, Philip, this is dreadful, you haven't hit the key result. It's the exact opposite. It's, hey, you know, look, you need to do this. You know, how can we help? What's the issue? What's the area that we can help in? That's how this will help you. And this might be, you know, initiatives, do a presentation. These are all the things I'm going to do. So I can do a presentation, email invites out, you know, follow up with Wes. And Wes might look at this and be like, hey, Philip, look, these are the things. Yeah, you've done the presentation, great. Did you email people? I know this is a dumb example, but I could be like, oh shit, actually I never invited anyone to Inate. That's the reason we only got to 10% usage. It's like, yeah, don't do it. Right. Very simplistic example, but this is why it's powerful for you to organize and align your company. And this is why it's really, really, really useful for iBoost, because they can help you, because they know exactly what you're trying to do clearly and consistently and where you are. When you've done this, you can go completed. That's great. It will be archived. So you'll be able to say, okay, these are all the things I've done, and please archive it. I'll talk about that in a little bit. Like the ability to say, look, I've executed on this thing, I've done this, I've done that, is great for you to show progress and execution to investors, VCs, angels, etc. But this is just a made-up example. If you really need to, you can click delete. I'm going to jump back to the presentation. Oh, sorry. If you have any questions on this, of course, do the training again, but you can also just ping me on Intercom and say, hey, got a problem with this, or what about this thing? Or, you know what, this doesn't work quite so well. Or, I've got a sort of deployment question. It's a Boolean. What should I put in as the metric? Oh, well, 0, 1, deployed, not deployed. Please ping me. I'm also going to say, please also email me. I'm going to jump back to this very quickly. Inate helps you to focus, to execute, to communicate internally about your OKRs, and it helps iBoost to help you. Your invitation should have been sent out. It will help train you. And if you have any questions, please contact me. The last thing is you control what data is shared and with whom. I strongly, strongly advise you don't stop iBoost from seeing your data. But if you really don't want them to, or if something happens or you need to pull somebody off, you have absolute control over that. And contact me if you have any questions there. You'll end up with a set of OKRs like this, and there'll be a weekly prompt to keep them updated, to add, to subtract, to remove, to complete, and to update the metrics. Please contact me. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn and approach me if you have any questions, queries, comments, feedback, etc. And on that, I'm going to open up the floor to questions. Actually, I'm not. I'm going to start with a question from the chat that Adam mentioned. So the question was, can an OKR framework be applicable during the MVP development stage? It can sound a little over the top, but I actually think that OKRs are most, if not maybe more applicable at the very, very early stages, because you don't have any resources. So you can be really, really clear what you need to execute upon. So the very, very earliest stages, it needs to be things like, I need to interview X amount of customers to understand their pain points. I need to send out Y% or Y amount of questionnaires and have them filled out. It's not about creating busy work. It is actually about holding yourself accountable, particularly in those confusing early days where you're like, I'm trying to figure it out, right? It's not busy work. It's like, actually, yeah, you've got to go through these steps, get this thing out. In the sort of building your MVP, it's really useful to track features, feedback, what are you getting done? Launching the MVP, it is less useful, I've got to be honest with you, as a dev tool. Like, use sprint planning, use Jira, use Atlassian. OKRs are not a great substitute for those. But actually figuring out what the features are, getting it deployed, getting it in users' hands, that's where the OKRs need to kick in. So it needs to be like, okay, I need to get my product into the hands of 50 customers by the end of Q2 2021. Okay, are we doing that? How are we doing that one? Like, what's happening here? Is that even feasible? Track that one. And then you need that feedback from customers. Like, how many bugs are you getting? How many bugs per 100 or 1,000 customers? What's the feedback? Are people satisfied or not? That's what you need to run with. So all the way through from the initial research, particularly into MVP and deploying it and going forward is when they're applicable. Does that answer your question, Adam, or is there more to that? I'll take that as a yes. I'll open the floor up though. Feel free to unmute. Don't just jump straight in or put questions in the chat, however you want to do it. But this is open time now.
Philip, how often do you recommend we update the OKRs? And thank you for the presentation, by the way.
Thank you.
Amazing. I loved it.
So there's a couple of different components. The cop-out question is it really depends upon your stage and depends upon your OKRs, right? The clear answer is if you were a large state set up company, mature company, 1,000+ employees. So my wife works at Google, 100,000+ employees. You'll find that OKRs become an annual thing. Everyone does them, but everyone kind of knows where they're going to. And so they're setting the objective because they've got some clarity for the next year. But at a really early stage company, if you set an annual set of OKRs, right, you're going to find within a month, a week maybe, that you actually have learned something different and you need to go in a different direction. And so this is part of the reason why I try to push you to write your OKRs in 4 minutes, right? Because they shouldn't be a holy grail. They should be a used object, right? At a really early stage, you need to be getting feedback, understanding your product, understanding your users, understanding what's working and what's not. And you need to be iterating around that. So you might set an objective of, sell via marketing. My key result is X amount of marketing qualified leads, etc. You get 2 weeks into that and you're like, whoa, this just isn't working, right? The fact you set as an objective and the fact you've written an OKR, right, doesn't mean you have to keep doing it. In fact, you need to just rip that OKR out of there and say, no, that makes no sense. Scrap the OKR, figure out what you need to do differently. Right, we're going to stop doing email marketing, for example. I'm going to go to Google Ads. Right, new way of doing it. Or we're going to stop marketing altogether. We're going to do outbound telephone-based sales. Right, get rid of the OKR, quickly iterate. So the answer really is your OKRs need to be, and the timing of your OKRs and the timing of review of your OKRs needs to be really closely tied to how quickly you are learning from your customers. And the last thing you want to be doing is setting long-term OKRs, but learning quickly and never updating what your company's doing. Practically, I recommend you look at your metrics and your numbers weekly. I think you need to be recording your key results, ideally weekly, but I know that not everyone can do that. So every 2 weeks, really at the worst every 4 weeks. But the faster you can understand what you're doing and iterate, the better, the speed with which you can learn and iterate is strongly, strongly correlated with your likelihood of success. Does that make sense? Cool. Got a question in the chat here. So as part of your OKRs, Hala is trying to take the number of followers on the Facebook page as one of your OKRs. However, no matter how many people it reaches, engagements and likes get on the post, I don't seem to get people following. Does that mean it's a fail, or am I not able to get into my target customers? Right. That's touching on this question of the execution and what you're setting as an objective and how you're measuring it and whether it's the right thing to be doing. Don't mistake writing a good objective and having a nice clear OKR with being the right thing to do. Also, like your startups, if you've not read The Lean Startup, go and read it, because what it starts to talk about is, if you could just think through your problem, then why hasn't a big Fortune 500 company or a consulting firm or one of your competitors done this, right? If you can think through it, you're probably not a startup, it's too obvious. So you have to default to experimenting and testing. So the question really boils down to, is that the right thing to be setting as an objective? Is it actually leading to success? And it sounds like it was a good objective. It sounds like it was a good OKR. But if it's not leading to success, then scrap it. What do you need to be doing? And think about that. It's not that it's good or bad. You've just learned something. If the number of followers is not leading to engagement, if it's not leading to the right result, then brilliant. You've learned that that's not the right thing to do. Find a different way to get to that end result and set up a new objective, a new key result that answers that. Does that answer the question there?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
No problem. And by the way, that's not failing, that's learning. And the more ways in which you can fail by figuring out this doesn't work, or this isn't the way of doing it, or this isn't the distribution method, or the right way of selling, the better, because eventually you'll come down to, oh, these things don't work, but this does. That's the way to execute in a startup.
Thanks again.
Any more questions, either from individuals? Put your hand up or unmute or in the chat. If that's the case, then it's been an absolute pleasure. Wes will be sending the presentation out on a sharing link, so it'll be viewed feel free to download, do whatever you want with it. Also feel free to connect with me, email me, etc., and give me any thoughts, feedback, etc. on my product. Thank you for your time. I'll hand it back to Wes.
Yeah, thank you, Philip. Yeah, it's a pleasure. As always, thank you for taking the time to chat with everyone. It's a fantastic platform that we've been, slowly getting everyone on board with. I just want to echo what Philip said. If you're having any kind of issues, this is something Philip's building out and it's still working on. So there will be little things here and there, some growing pains, I'm sure, but reach out to him directly through the platform or connect with me. I can loop you in via email with Philip.
Thank you all. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you
Good
so
luck
much.
with it.
Yeah, thank you,
Bye.
Philip.
Thanks.